Blessed love and peace in Rastafari. This is another joint. We got traffic static, some uncertainty about the audio levels, so we're doing it like this for the moment, without the earphones even. How about that? Notes. So the first joint to share is when I talk about my experience in Denmark, applying for political asylum, the experience in the refugee camp, being forcibly kicked out of the refugee camp, thrown into an open field, and then later forcefully taken to a prison house, then forcefully deported at the hands of Kubenhounds and Dansk most finest. When I say all of that, it's appropriate for me to articulate, to emphasize, to explicitly explain and exclaim, proclaim, announce, let it be known, Denmark loves me. No question about that. Denmark loves me. Denmark wants me to be in Denmark. The situation, what had happened is the United States forces its hand in the deportation. And there can be all different types of retroactive rationalizations and explanations and everything else like that, from accusations of Denmark not wanting me to my more pleading and otherwise. Ultimately, essentially, in this earthly experience, the United States forces its hand upon Denmark in illegally deporting me back to the United States. So all that being said, Denmark loves me. Hallelujah. The things that happen in Denmark, that Denmark does to me, is all for a reason, even beyond the volition of Denmark. Denmark puts me in shackles, and it's not even between me and Denmark, it's between Denmark and God, Denmark and our ancestors. So that's another situation. So yeah, it's not all right. However, it is all love. So let there be no uncertainty or scrutiny or accusations about the biases, prejudices, and otherwise within Denmark, the betrayals even. Beautiful conversations thoroughly with kinfolk, from the prison guards to the politi, to the staff at the refugee camp, to the members of the civic society, leadership within the civic society, kinfolk in the prison or in the refugee camp, staff, visitors, residents, kinfolk who put me up, kinfolk I talk with on the street randomly. Love, thoroughly, continually, impressively. Kinfolk that I meet off in the cut, training attack dogs. Love. So let that be said. Let that be known. Now, again, in describing that experience of the whole thing of being a refugee, what is recognized is it being a pledge process. Pledging, particularly kinfolk who come from this walk, into the experience of sovereignty, what it is to be an entity amongst the nations, without the cushion of oppression, without having others to blame it on or whatever else, but answering for everything we do, say, and think. That is one thing when dealing with the oppression and righteousness and being otherworldly, but this is in the actual world experience. And so, again, the teachings of His Majesty Haile Selassie I provide very strong benefit in this experience of sovereignty, of earthly sovereignty. So, that's what we see, that's what we recognize as part of the divine purpose in these experiences of trials and tribulations. So that's the case with every trial and tribulation, as Meng Tzu teaches us a number of thousands of years ago. So that's note number uno. Now I'm going to go into recent static. I'm adjusting the sequence of my notes here. So being back here. Oh, the other thing also. So The United States forces its hand, returning me. Why does the United States return me here? If the United States doesn't want me, why does the United States want me? I am perceived by the United States as a threat because I have knowledge, I have credibility, I have discipline. We have knowledge, we have credibility, we have discipline. And we are walking a path that is different from the convention of the United States, particularly the United States government, the U.S. Constitution. So that is perceived as a threat, even though initially the intention is not anything overthrowing. And when perceiving something as a threat, particularly a domestic threat, it's a matter of, there are a number of ways of trying to limit, quiet, and additionally discredit. When that threat is outside of the boundaries of that domestic entity, that's scary business. And so there's, even when there's not the intentionality of like organizing a coup d'etat or anything else like that of the republic, there's always that concern, because that's the nature of the hierarchy of convention. It's always scheming and everything, so there's always that fear of being schemed on. And so even just talking with people and telling the international community of just like what life is here and giving the keys to the kingdom, to the ivory towers, and additionally, the United States didn't want that, so the United States forces its hand to bring me back here. Now, it's even beyond the purview of the United States. So the third element in this joint on that side is the world system allowing it to happen, standing by and watching and facilitating it happening. And so in that respect, what is recognized is that beyond just the selfish corruptions within the world system itself, particularly significantly influenced by the Republic, the World Republic, it's a matter of recognizing that the world wants me to be here, particularly for the purpose of facilitating, optimizing and facilitating peace and order on this land amidst the approaching and anticipating significant changes. We can call it upheaval, we can call it evolution, transformation, we can call it system change and otherwise. So the world wants me here to optimize the experience of peace and cooperation amongst the different factions that are in the midst of civil war at this moment. So that's my purpose here. I know the trees here. I know the animals here. I know the lay of the land and the culture, the history, vibrations, and additionally. So there's value. The world values me being here, and that's why the world watches by and condones me being forcefully deported back here. So it's a matter of understanding the nature of things and doing it. Now, in that sense, there's leverage. There's political capital, there's diplomatic capital, and all these other things. So it's a matter of navigating and negotiating agreements along these lines, because it's not just to be idle and just be like a spectator or whatever else, but we have purpose here. Kultur House, domestic refugee camps, academy, piety, schoolhouses, Rastafari villages, and additionally. So we still have the same purpose that we always do throughout the journey, throughout the saga. And so it's a matter of parlaying. It's not even like kind of like that quid pro quo kind of scheming, whatever, but it's a matter of applying the capital from the experiences, the wrongdoings. No, recognize there ain't going to be no justice. Ain't going to be. We don't look to the earth for justice. We don't look to the world system for justice. But at the same time, there's influence and leverage and balance. So it's a matter of utilizing these, recognizing the institutions in these equations to facilitate the works that we are guided to do by the grace of the Most High. So that's part of the experience concerning Denmark. Now we get into the recent static about me being here for the past 2 years, but particularly within the past year and recent months. So just very extremely brief and summary as I sit here on a hot spot in terms of how many times my life has been threatened by just simply crossing the street in the crosswalk with the light. So that's the nature of the static. So it's ongoing. It has ebbs and flows. We don't go out looking for none. But at the same time, just being out here, we just recognize it's predatory and it's civil warfare at this moment. the three levels I described before. The guns and bombs, that's the lowest level, level 3. Level 2 is the biological, chemical, pharmaceutical type of warfare. And then level 1 is the no name, no visibility, telepathic cipher type of warfare. And in actuality, ultimately, it's love. And that's the greatest power. So we work towards concentrating our discipline and our works in that respect, and navigating the threats that we experience intermediately at the second and third levels. That being said, what we recognize also is that the grocery store is a hotbed for predator. First of all, this place of where I live, the village known as Coventry, is in the Cuyahoga area of Ohio, that is. Has a number of restaurants. It's a place for young people go, but it's also a place of significant trafficking, human trafficking, sex trafficking of men and women, as well as children. That's plain as day. I see it directly, and it's very difficult to address it because people can hide. Police are significantly impotent in addressing it directly. It's all about evidence, and people are too sophisticated for the capacity of the conventional law. So one runs the risk of being accused retroactively, and then getting further hostilities from the gangsters that are doing it. Not just the gangsters, but the potentates, the leadership of society that are doing it and paying for it. So that's what we have right here, regular daily basis. I mean, when you know what you're looking for. I saw a video again of, like, in Chinatown, somebody was just like filming with the same scene as Chinatown in New York, in the land of the Mohawk. And and showing like the storefronts and everything. You could see young girls, maybe like 13, 14 years old, standing in the door fronts, and then when they saw the camera, they would scurry back inside. Now that's very inconspicuous, and people go say, oh, they're just hanging out, whatever. Okay, keep on with that. So that's what we got here. It's inconspicuous, but we see the signs. There's certain hours when we see the certain hours after like towards the dusk. Like 7 p.m., 8 p.m. During different periods of the year. But I mean, it's different times, and it's different situations, whether it's one adult being with a child, and like the way they talk to the child, the way they interact, they just are so uncomfortable. They feel like so guilty in being with the child. It's so evident. They feel so uncomfortable. It's not like a parent like, yo, come on, let's go. They just feel like they don't want to be found out. And that's a lot of the culture here. It's like everybody's in dirt and don't want to be found out, so they just ignore what everybody else is doing. And when somebody does say something, now they get the attention of and even the cats is doing dirt who aren't involved in that don't like that, because they don't like that. They don't like snitches and all that other stuff. How about that? So anyway, all right, that's the scene we're going in. So when we do speak out, when we do even just live life, we get responses accordingly, reactions accordingly. So the ongoing static that we experience is from status quo. It's from the streets. It's from LGBTQ, particularly within the past year, because we voice certain concerns about what the LGBTQ community is doing. So then we get LGBTQ hostilities and static. But it also reveals like the corruption and efficacy of the supposed government, because a lot of the static from LGBTQ is through the auspices, or at least claimed through the auspices of U.S. government offices. So whether it's actually done that way or if it's just a counterfeit, it makes comparatively less difference at this point, because these are the circumstances. But that's what we observe in terms of the LGBTQ. It doesn't do it directly. It's very passive aggressive in terms of starting static and trying to like upset people. But when it gets serious, then it goes the conventional route, the imperial route. And so that's what we observe in the past year. So there's the ongoing static with that. Static recently, particularly from the Israeli-Palestinian bullshit. On both sides, we get static, ongoing, and it picks up. Actually, it picks up on one side particularly, because just the nature of it. But that's recent static as well. And then what else we got? Right, Little Italy. So this is an ongoing thing, but just this past weekend, and I'm not trying to like blow people spot or whatever, but I am responding to this joint, just sharing it for the record. I have to be mindful of the lesson or the principle to emphasize after sharing this anecdote. So I'm just going to be very brief. So I'm coming back a couple of days ago from being at the library, stop at the grocery store just minutes before it closes, endeavoring to get something. There's only one entrance to the grocery store, and again, this is where people do their surveys, their petitions. It's like the watering hole, and the crocodiles are just waiting there for prey. So as I'm there, I drop off the chair that I'm sitting in at this moment in the front rather than carrying it through the store. And as I'm doing that, a brother comes up to me and says, "Yo, question." I'm like, "Okay, I don't know who this is, whatever." They're coming from a pickup truck on the other side. And I'm like, "Oh, what's up?" So he's like, "Yo, I'm so-and-so from the cigar shop." And I'm trying to like do the mathematics like, oh, here we go. Okay. So just as a background, the cigar shop has out two racist effigies of cigar shop engines, disrespectful to our ancestors, and further. It's less on the radar of our local Native community because no local Native community already just has the victory of changing the name of Cleveland baseball and is dealing with the aftermath of that victory because there are parting shots that convention does as a way of like divide and conquer kind of temptations and tactics or whatever. So anyways, that's part of the scene. So there's less of an organized front on this movement of shutting down cigar shop engines because it's not the big news thing or whatever. So anyways, but meanwhile, I gotta walk by it all the time, and I can't just say nothing. I say for years and years, amidst the racial static involving Little Italy, black and white, and further, pretty much anything not white or not Italian. I walk through the neighborhood regularly for years and talk with the brethren there meaningfully, honestly. We have beautiful rapport, beautiful combos and relationships. So then a few years ago when I see this joint, I'm like, so after seeing it repeatedly for a while, I just be like, yo, I can't walk here no further because I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm liable to do things because my patience can just get as much as I cultivate it. I also recognize their limitations, so I have to be mindful of how important it is to be susceptible to that type of scenario of losing my patience. So I try to do certain indirect communications. We forward a communication officially to the city of Cleveland and ceasing the cigar shop and other kinfolk of Little Italy, including the Catholic diocese, if I recall correctly. So we're not hiding it. We put a sign on the window. And so anyways, that's the background. So that's been for the past couple of years. So I don't know who the owner is specifically. I know a number of the owners of other shops and restaurants, but I don't know who the owner is specifically. And I don't bring it up with I did bring it up with kinfolk recently in the past month or two for the first occasion directly in person. Because the thing is, once you bring it up in person and you have that conversation, it's like drawing a line at that point. And now we've had that discussion, and now it's like, okay, are we going to be okay or are we not going to be okay? So I've gone to the cigar shop and I've endeavored to have that conversation before, but anyways, that's the situation. So on this day, a couple of days ago, brother says, "Yo, question, what's up? I own the cigar shop." Okay, here we go. This question. He's like, "Yeah, so what's the problem that you have with the cigar shop?" Now, first of all, you know very well what the problem is. You're not stupid. You're not ignorant. So now we're playing that game. And then we're also playing that game of pretending not to get any of the communications or whatever else. So I said, that's a sit-down conversation, brother. Like that's something to be done. Like I said, there's like 2 minutes, literally 2 minutes for me to go to the store to get what I have to get at that moment. But I'm taking that window. I say, okay, the brother's communicating to me in my village, wants to talk, so let's talk. I say it's a sit-down conversation, but he wants to talk further at that moment. So I say, okay, fine. Long story short, it's disrespectful to my ancestors. It doesn't even matter about me, but it's to my ancestors particularly. And so he's like, okay, I can see that. And so, all right, fine, there it is. You recognize enough said. And he's like, well, he started to talk about like, we saw you put the sign on the window, and it wasn't a problem because it's not like breaking the window. It's like he acted like I was trying to hide it or something. Like, ain't nobody hiding. So, but it's okay. I'm trying not to fall for the provocations. And he was respectful. And so, trying to keep that congeniality and the productivity of the conversation. just had another conversation just earlier this week with a police officer for probably an hour at least about property and politics and sovereignty, and additionally. So obviously there are things that are happening, there's things that are motivating people, because these are things that we communicate for a long time, and now we're getting the responses from the ground level head knockers, to be honest, is what it is. So all right, well, we'll have this diplomacy. I share that, and recognizing and making efforts. He mentioned seeing me put it up there, not having a problem with that, and because they said I wasn't breaking the window or whatever. So I'm like, okay, well then you're aware, and now you have the information, and so then I go even further with a benevolent will, and I share a sacred story from the Skokie tradition about hiji, about tobacco, the sacredness of tobacco. He talks about appreciating natural remedies and appreciating tobacco for the quality, and knowing how tobacco comes from native culture, and he talks about some of his experience with the native community, a lot of the standard spiel, but acknowledging his affinity for natural being of the earth, and additionally recognizing that similarity, that shared value. So I share with him the story of hiji, of tobacco within the Skokie tradition, and so as a gesture, not just a gesture, but a sharing of benevolent will. So there's that, and then he's like, yeah, and then he's like, well, we can have our different opinions. I'm like, what? Okay, I see where this is at this point, and I'm not going to argue. It's not a matter of arguing. But we'll see what the response is. I'm not trying to force it. I can see there's ego involved. I did mention, because I talked with him a number of years ago, not knowing that he was the owner of the cigar shop, because he looks like a player from Italia, and I made that comment when I saw him in Little Italy a number of years ago. And he looked at me like he didn't know what I was talking about, and so I said, "Do you know who that is?" And he still, the brother who was with him was kind of like smiling, and kind of like, "Yeah, he does." I wasn't trying to clown or whatever. I'm just saying, like, yo, I don't know who you are, but here's a frame of reference. And so here's a way of like, yo, I know something about where you come from, what's important to you. Viva Azzurri. So anyways, but I can say, like, maybe that's something that his people was like clown him on or whatever. And so he doesn't know if I'm trying to clown him or whatever at that time. And so when I saw him on a couple days ago, I made that, oh yeah, I remember we had that conversation. And he's like, yeah, I don't mind that. As if like he's heard it before, like as if it's an insult. I didn't mean it as an insult, but I can see how that could be perceived that way. So it may be that he has less of a concern or whatever about insulting me, because he sees that me, or perceives me as insulting him. So I recognize that as well. So anyways, all that being said, let it go for that evening. Missed the grocery store. It was closed by the time I did it. So I say buonasera. He says buonasera. And then we continue on our way. Now it just so happens that yesterday I had the occasion of going through Little Italy again for the first time since that conversation, and there are the smoke shop engines again. So at that point, this conversation is a done deal, and that's what we were endeavoring to avoid, that kind of blatant disrespect. And it's remindful of like the standby within gangster films, the Italiano gangster films. I don't mean to be stereotypical, but we are part of this culture, and so like the whole thing about like the bravado and people like clowning, busting each other's balls, and being all smiley face, and then saying, oh yeah, by the way, F you, and then continuing on. So that's what this feels like. And then in response, it feels like, what have I done to deserve this respect? Deserve this disrespect? That's what it feels like. We're going back to the movies and these things or whatever. Now even further than that, I'm going to go to China and the Beijing bicycle from the 1990s. In that film, there's a brother who was in like private school, had a bicycle, lost the bicycle, had a girl because he had the bicycle, then got mad at the girl, took her for granted. So then she started like hanging out with a gangster who had his own bicycle crew. So then when he sees the girl again, the young brother, he goes up to the girl and tries to like connect with her again. And so as he's like trying to talk to her and everything, here comes the gangster with his bicycle. And so the gangster bicyclist like rides up very slowly, and then rides around in a circle around the young brother, as if to show like, yo, I got this. And then the young girl kind of walks off, and then so the gangster brother asks the young brother for a cigarette. The brother doesn't have a cigarette and is like accommodating and apologetic, and so the gangster's like. So then he goes into his own pocket and gets out a cigarette, and then he asks for a light. The brother doesn't have a light. I guess that's what it was. The brother didn't have a light. Either way, then the gangster gets his own light, and then takes a puff from the cigarette, and then takes out the cigarette from his mouth, and then puts it in the young boy's mouth or the young brother's mouth, and then hits him on the cheek, kind of affectionately, and then goes off with his girl. So the young brother is just like paused there, like, and just like so much disrespect for himself, like how he just went out like that. So then he goes out and chases the young gangster, whatever else. So that's just another scene of just like that thorough, calm, smiley in the face kind of disrespect. Because at the end of the conversation a couple of days ago, it seems like he called me son. Well, no, here's what it is that he invited me after we seemed to like have an understanding, and he didn't say that he wasn't going to put it out there again. I didn't ask him. I didn't go up to him at that moment, because we were already beyond the point of diplomacy, direct diplomacy at that point. We're in the other modes at this point. He came to me, and so I didn't have any objective in that conversation. I shared with him the information that he solicited, and that's it. Didn't ask him or solicit him even at that moment to stop. I just shared him with the information. It's up to him to make that decision. The way that the conversation ends is congeniality. So there's the overture of, okay, you know what? I didn't force the point. I didn't try to break his chops or whatever, say, yeah, you better do this. I didn't say any of that. Just tell him the information, share with him a story that's sacred and genuine, and let that ride. So as we were closing the conversation, he's like, yeah, man, anytime I come through, yo, man, sit down, have some coffee, da-da-da-da-da, whatever you need. Yo, I ask him what his name is. He says his name. I'm not going to put it out here like this. Plus, I'm very, most likely not his actual name. So I'm like, all right, cool. And there it is. So we'll see what happens. And then again, like I said, it just so happens I had the occasion of going by the neighborhood, Little Italy, yesterday, and there are the cigar shop engines again outside the cigar shop. So right there again, it's that slap in the face. So we respond accordingly. Now again, we're not getting into the gangster because we recognize the brother is a slave. He is a slave. He doesn't own himself. He is owned by others. He might be the proprietor of the cigar shop. Most likely, he does not own the building. So he is beholden to others. Even in the scenario of him owning the building, there are other entities that have a purview over who he is and what he's able to do, and he is enacting the aggressions and hostilities of those higher ups. So again, it's provocation. It's lower level kinfolk, and no disrespect to anybody. I'm a piece of shit. I walk with God. I'm no better or worse than anybody. It's just a matter of understanding the hierarchies and how the game is played. So it's a matter of provocation. It's a matter of divide and conquer. It's a matter of like saying, everything against Italiano, da 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 da. So we're not doing that because we recognize the game is above that. He and his kinfolk are yearning to be themselves, to be Italiano, and actually, the connection with native kinfolk is a desperate endeavor just to stay connected and have some semblance of credibility with this earth, some semblance of indigeneity amidst the influx of further immigration, further foreigners, further kinfolk with further pockets coming in. So as happening right now, gentrification in Little Italy at this moment, not high rise, but larger rise luxury apartments, and additionally being built where there's the historic theater and other houses, and additionally. So Little Italy is catching it right now, and is being leveraged to try to provoke what the higher ups perceive as further threats or antagonisms or substitutes or otherwise. So like I said, we're not doing that. Now at the same time, we do have to be direct, because in the gangster mentality, when kinfolks are perceived as getting slighted, that's an invitation for other kinfolk to try to do the same thing, or even for the same kinfolk to go even further. So we have to be mindful of that, because it's appropriate to recognize that just within recent weeks, there is somebody who is employed in Italiano, Little Italy, who works at one of the restaurants, who I see at 3 a.m. trying to steal things, take things from the Sukkah schoolhouse in broad darkness. I mean, like just being loud, and almost being belligerently loud, as if to like intentionally make the noise like, yo, he's being put there to do this. He doesn't want to, so he's going to be very like belligerent about it because he knows who I am. He doesn't want to do it, so he wants to be caught. But he's been put on a mission. So when I come, like, he's still insistent upon taking the things. I'm like, yo, no. So he leaves it for that moment. But then again, a day or two later, it's gone. So this is what we're observing. This is some of the hostilities that we're experiencing from a number of different directions. Now, with regards to the Cleveland Heights situation, with the stagnancy of concerning the well-being of people, all right, so I'll share what we're dealing with, what we are deliberating with at this moment, at this very intersection that I'm looking at this moment. What we are deliberating on is whether we continue within the path of the jaywalking life, because what we recognize is that not only is the conventional law of the United States, state of Ohio, and the different municipalities of this region not sufficiently providing for the protection and well-being of the life, human life, animal life, plant life in this area. Not only is the conventional authority, police, government, and otherwise, indirectly causing harm to people by not providing sufficient protection, by the crosswalk safety, and additionally, by the antagonisms, the civil war that factions that factions and consortiums and consortia, and additionally, there's a word. It's not cartels. We're just going to say consortia. That the different factions and consortia are inflicting upon each other. Not only are the police and government indirectly causing harm to people by not sufficiently providing protection to people. Now, and it's not just now, but it's gotten to a point of woeful direct harm. And an example is, and this might seem slight, might just seem minuscule or whatever else, but this is just an example. But this light right here, it's very iffy, and it's very hostile towards pedestrians, regardless of who the pedestrians are, race, religion, adult males, women, young children, elders, or otherwise. It's a hostile thing because there's people speed through here, going through here, and the light to cross is extremely quick. And so, as an example, when I crossed, again, 2 days ago, I'd have actually been that same day, that same night. The light changes when I'm maybe 2 or 3 steps away from the crosswalk, from the intersection. So I continue to walk along with the traffic, and then by the time I got to the middle, I'm walking casually with a casual pace. I'm actually able to walk without pain and without a limp at this moment. So we say hallelujah, give thanks and praise to the Most High. As I got to the middle, at the median of the road, of the street, all of a sudden the light changes green. There's a car waiting. There's a vehicle waiting to go. I had to wave that car in front of me to go ahead to not obstruct that vehicle. But that was a comparatively benign situation. And again, I'm walking at a very casual pace. I'm not walking slow. I'm not an elder. I'm not a child. I'm a grown adult walking at a casual pace, and the light changes from red to green, or from green to red, either way you look at it, for the oncoming traffic to go right through. So it's nice that the one car is already stopped and sees me and doesn't go ahead. But it's another situation if a car is just speeding through and just says, oh, green light, and continues on when somebody has yet to finish walking light. I see this happen just a few weeks ago when an uncle was getting off the bus to go to one of his appointments. He was waiting for that because he knows the light changes too quick for him to cross. So he initially stops and waits at the middle, and then just waits for the traffic to go by, and then waits for the traffic to subside to finish crossing the street. So that's an example of conventional law directly causing harm and threatening the life, not just indirectly by just not protecting, but directly by telling a person, here's it safe to cross. Oh no, it's not. The system is putting lives in jeopardy. And when that's the situation, then we have to decide, like, it's not even a matter of like corruption and injustice. Like the system, the core of the system is putting people in danger. And now we're like, okay, we're at the jaywalk life because we're deliberating on that, because we are solicited years ago to utilize the crosswalks directly from the police in a very friendly congenial way and in a respectful way. And because of that, we honor that. And we work cooperatively because we are the law. We are the law of the world. So we have a responsibility to work with the domestic law, with the local laws, to maintain proficient order and public safety. When the local law and the domestic law is not doing that, we have an obligation to act accordingly. So recognizing the conditions, particularly as it pertains to pedestrian traffic, we do our utmost to work within the lines, but the lines are causing danger at this moment, direct danger. So we have to make that decision about whether we work outside of the lines. All right. So, and it's not hatred. It's not. It's just like this is genuine law and order, peace and well-being, and kinfolk can respond accordingly. When I articulate that recently, the immediate response is, well, we don't want anything to happen to you and this, that, and the other. And so it's that passive aggressive threat and hostilities. And so the response to that is that it would be a shame for tens of millions of U.S. citizens to die because of the negligence and the belligerence and the greed of its leadership, through civil warfare, through invasion of foreigners, through the occupation of foreigners because of civil war. Tens of millions. So let that passive aggressive hostility and threats go, because recognize the society at this moment is in the depths of civil war, and the implications of it are severe. I'm communicating at this moment, a very tip of the iceberg kind of experience of that, and it goes much further, deeper in depth. So anyways, all that being said, our purpose is optimizing the well-being, optimizing the order and the safety of kinfolk here. So getting away from the false divide and conquer tropes of black and white and religiosity and everything else like that. The higher enemies, it's not even enemies, the higher aggressors, the higher threats, cannibalism and pedophile. All the as I said before, all the rude boys, all the head knockers are servants and slaves to the pedophiles and cannibals. So don't trip off of the head knockers and the disrespect or whatever else. Yes, we have to stand our ground and protect ourselves, but be careful how much we bite on those provocations, because they're just the extensions. And I don't want to say puppets and be disrespectful, but it's the puppetry of the pedophiles and the cannibals. So recognize that. All the different factions around the world. Anyway, it's starting to rain. We're getting raindrops. So we're almost here at the end, wrapping up this joint. So in that respect, when we look at the black and white situation, first of all, recognize black and white. The difference between black and African. African has further knowledge of self. Black is simply hate. Black is an identification with anger and hate, and all the things that come with that. Same thing with white. White is simply hate and anger, and all the envelopments and confusions that exist within that. I'm watching kinfolk go through red lights at this very moment, through crosswalks, pedestrians crossing through crosswalks, kinfolk walking. Kinfolk cutting off, and now kinfolk are getting further aggressive. I just saw one cat make a left turn in front of somebody who's walking in the crosswalk. So these are the type of aggressions we're talking about, the kind of devaluation of life. And additionally, so people can just think it's just like my minuscule type stuff, but this is life, and it's the disregard for life and the devaluation of life. So when we talk about black and white, as the rain comes down further strong, we're gonna move to underneath the tree over here. Black and white. We knew this wasn't gonna be short. Alright. Black and white is hate. Black is hate, white is hate, when identifying as such. Now we know the importance of the history and everything else like that, and people work with what people got, but it's beneficial for people to recognize, we got to take it to the next level of like learning who you are, because that's what it is. It's an ignorance of a knowledge of self. When one calls oneself black, it's an ignorance of a knowledge of self. When one calls oneself white, it's an ignorance of the knowledge of self. Those who identify as being black, every black person is an orphan, Every white person is an orphan. Detached from heritage, parentage, lineage, ancestors. That's what black is, that's what white is. So, for those who have a genuine interest and genuine knowledge of self, it's a matter of finding additional names for oneself. Now, all that being said, we're gonna flip the script on what I just said. Identifying as black is an experience of the orphan, not knowing where the orphan comes from, not knowing how else to identify. It's ignorance. It's ignorance, a lack of a knowledge of self. And when there's a militance, and additionally with that, it's hate. And same thing with white. Now, that being said, we talk about black love, haha. Even white love, haha. Black love, that is near the celestial. How that is. If the experience of being black is hate, and it's ignorance, and it's anger, and it's hatred. Same thing with white. The experience of white is ignorance, and anger, and hatred. Superiority, it's ignorant superiority. Haha, we got the wind coming in. So, all right, we're going to wrap this up. It's ignorant superiority. That's anger, that's hatred. Now, love, when we talk about black love, even white love, that is near to the celestial. Why that is? Because in the midst of that ignorance, not knowing oneself, not being rooted and secure, and still venturing to love, true love, black love, white love, still loving, reaching out, making oneself available, feeling the connection, relationship. That's near the celestial, because that is nasty faith. It is nasty faith to have black love. It is nasty faith to have white love. So all that being said, we're going to delve further into the depths of the refuge of the tree whilst we finish this joint. Interesting. The leaves, the branches hang low. But once you get inside the branches, the ceiling is much higher. So we're trying to take care of the technology as well whilst we're in here. So that is what we have to share. Now, amidst this whole thing, and as I get to the concluding this joint, we might get it underneath an hour. Whoa, with all the water drops, with all the water drops. Water. Way much further water than initially estimated. We're gonna have to get the napkin out on this joint. We struck a nerve. We've got water. Alright, so I mentioned before the experience in Denmark, the spiritual path additionally. The preparation, the pledge process for assuming sovereignty in this earthly realm. One thing I get to mention. Well, I'll say this, and then I'll share the other journey, and then get to wrap it up to the conclusion. So, amidst this journey of again pledging and getting into the realm of the monarchy, not the monarchies, but the sovereignties of Earth. People ask like who we are, what we are, what's that we claim, or whatever else. Try to put us in a box. And additionally, when we look within ourselves to discern like what our place is in this world, whether it's mixed heritage, whether it's Rastafari, whether it's a specific other religious tradition or otherwise, how do we be true to who we are, what we've learned, what our teachers teach us, who our ancestors are, and additionally. And also recognize that in this experience of amalgamation, of like this confluence of the different teachings and lineages and pathways of earthly pathways, like, is this supposed to be a new religion and whatever else? What we recognize is this: what we are called upon to do in this life at this moment, in this juncture of world civilization, is not establish a religion, not even establish a distinct ethnic-based sovereignty, a mixed heritage-based sovereignty per se. What our guidance is, what we are called to do at this moment, what we see is that is establishing a new caste, a new Varna, not a new Varna system, but a new Varna amongst the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, and Dalits. A new caste, and this caste is a priestly caste that is also householders. So when we look at the history, when we look at the heritage, we see that there's the traditional orders of Judaism, there's the traditional orders of Hinduism and the original Varna system. We recognize that within each of these experiences, the Buddha emerges and turns the Varna system on its head by basically saying that calling it obsolete. Same thing with Jesus. And then we recognize the further progression of the world heritage lineage with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, providing a reconciling religiosity that involves both the Buddha and Jesus basically saying, in order to experience like beyond the established castes of that day, whether it's within the tribes of Judaism or whether it's within the Varna system of Hinduism, it's a matter of leaving the household life, walking the earth as a celibate, renunciate, and depending as a beggar, and living upon the contributions of the faithful, of those who would have value for what the person teaches. So that's what the Buddha and Jesus teach. So it's very difficult not having children, not living in a regular household life. So that's that. Then when the Prophet Muhammad arrives, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and from him there is the gurus of the Punjab of Sikhi, and then later on Baha'u'llah. There is a further reconciling religiosity that acknowledges the teachings from before, affirms the truth within those teachings from before, and then also practices a religiosity that builds from those teachings, and that also includes the family life. So affirming marriage, children, and the living in this world as a regular householder. So that's part of like the history of world civilization and world religiosity, the evolution, the progression. And so what we are doing at this moment is not introducing a new religion amidst that. It is a matter of establishing a new caste. We observe the caste system exists all around the world, particularly obviously within India, but even here within the United States, there's what people perceive as like the freedom of religion and the religious leadership as the Brahmins. Science is ascending into that realm of being the priestly caste and having a knowledge about the body, and people are worshiping that experience and basically paying homage and allegiance to those who have that type of knowledge. In addition to that, then there are the workers, there are the Kshatriyas, those are the landowners. Those are the ones who are the shot callers who tell who the politicians are, and additionally. And then there are the white collar workers, the Vaishyas, and then there are the blue collar workers who are the Shudras, the ones who do the physical labor. So that's the caste system in America. And to transcend caste, it's extremely difficult. People are still socialized. It's very severe apartheid, even when people don't want to acknowledge that. So to transcend those experiences of caste, essentially one is required to leave one's own family and adopt the ways of the other caste, and just kind of immerse and be very subservient within that particular caste. So what we are introducing is a new caste that is based upon the Panchasilas, the 5 ethics of the Buddha: peace, sharing, chastity, honesty, and sobriety. It builds from the narratives, the teachings of the world, Tabari Goka Tao, Torah, Bhagavad Gita, Digha Nikaya, Dhammapada, Gospels, Quran, and Tao Te Ching as a norm, as a foundation. And it's a world literacy. So we ourselves practice this. We practice these teachings. But in terms of what the further effects of what we are doing, it is establishing a methodology of walking on this earth, regardless of what one's religiosity is, what one's ethnic, linguistic, traditional, cultural heritage is. It's a way of being on this earth with ethics and with world literacy, in order to be family, be a householder, have children, live in the worldly life in a proficient, productive, pragmatic way, regardless of what one's religiosity is. So it doesn't require conversion, it doesn't require pledges of allegiance or whatever else. It's for each one to find their path in that respect accordingly, whether it's staying within a traditional religion or otherwise. But it's a caste, because there is in that discipline, in the ethical discipline, there are vulnerabilities. There are say vulnerabilities in terms of not being able to be ambitious, not being able to conquer others. And additionally, there is that philosophy that exists within the different teachings of the different religions, but it requires a certain structure of support for those around them to acknowledge and support the value of that walk, and to receive the guidance, the teaching, the insight, the perspective, the reminders, the rituals that come from that guidance as well, regardless of what the religiosity is. So it's a way of being, it's a way of walking this earth, significantly rooted within ethics, and having a literacy about how the world functions, and then being at home with wherever one's home is. So it's a caste. It's a caste. It's like a quasi between the Brahmin and the Kshatriya type caste, because it doesn't require celibacy, it doesn't require renunciation, but it also is secluded. It's precluded, or I won't say prohibited, but it's precluded from precepts of ownership and conquest, and controlling things. So it's like in between the Brahmin and the Kshatriya caste. And it is compatible with the different religiosities, whether it's Orthodox Judaism to the Varna system within Hinduism, and there might be a discussion about that, because that would be somewhat presumptuous for me to say that personally. But from China to Africa to Europe, and additionally. So anyways, that's what we were called upon to share, to introduce, to bring with the world at this moment. For those who have the inclination and the interest. We're not proselytizing, we're not trying to convert, we're offering that, because there are many people who are yearning for that. Now, that being said, what I'll share also is that even as I stand here underneath these green trees, it's with an awareness that we exist within different realms simultaneously. We can talk about like people from different castes, from different classes of society, sitting with each other, being in proximity with each other, but being in different worlds, living in different worlds. People from who have different languages, different religions, might be on the bus together, and additionally, but live in different worlds. Doesn't mean it's antagonistic or hostile towards each other, but just different worlds, very, very different worlds. And so that's a metaphor, but that's a common euphemism to describe that experience. So in that acknowledgement, we take that awareness even further, and recognizing how when people share that company with each other, those worlds are merged together at that moment. Those whatever different worlds that people come from are exactly coexist simultaneously with each other, overlap, or however we describe it at that moment. Peace and blessings to the kinfolk who share camaraderie. That's a veiled shout out. Anyways, so multiple worlds coexisting with each other simultaneously. Now, taking that a little bit further, there are also realms. There are realms that coexist. So that when I'm standing here and looking at the things through the senses, hearing things through the senses, there are things that exist here at this very moment that exist beyond the senses. Now, to the scientific mind, that sounds like psychosis. Somebody's hearing something, somebody's seeing things. And additionally, that's actually part of the kind of like the rote litmus test of discerning compatibility within like the scientific hierarchy. And also, by the way, science is like the new Christianity at this moment in world civilization. So it's interesting just to observe that. But anyways, that's a side note. We're working with simultaneous realms at this moment. So I'll give two examples of what I'm talking about. In Torah, thousands of years ago, there's a narrative whereby there's this prophet, Balaam, and he's going, basically he's a little bit greedy. He wants to. He's been summoned to give a curse amidst the prospect of warfare, and one of the corrupt kings has hired him and wants to give him riches in order for the prophet to curse the other side, which is actually Israel. So Balaam, after a series of talks and consultation with Elohim, goes on his way to meet the king. And as he's on his way, there's an angel of God, an angel of Elohim, that stands in front of him on his path. However, Balaam does not see the angel. The angel is carrying a sword and threatening to kill Balaam. But Balaam does not see him. However, his mule does, his donkey does. So when the donkey sees the angel standing with the sword in the path about to kill Balaam, the donkey veers off the path, and Balaam gets angry at the donkey, saying, "What's wrong with you, donkey? What you doing? Being all disobedient and whatever else." So he kicks the donkey, gets back on it. It happens 3 times. On the 3rd time, Balaam is about to kill the donkey because he's frustrated with the donkey. Keep going off the path and like disrespecting Balaam. And it's at that moment that Balaam's eyes are opened, and he sees the angel of Elohim with the sword about to kill Balaam. And so Balaam immediately says, my bad, yo, my bad. What you want? What's going on? So, point for that is that there is an ancient narrative about walking in this realm, and there existing beings, entities, phenomena that are beyond our senses that actually influence our experiences and the conditions around us. So that's one story. Now we go back all the way to traditional Scandinavian culture. In traditional Scandinavian culture, now the names of it escape me at the moment, but it's understood that there are beings, like little beings. You can say dwarfs, midgets, or otherwise, and that's not with disrespect. That's just for lack of a better word at the moment. But little beings that are invisible, that are like in the forest, and additionally, and one has to be mindful of that, because when pouring out water or pouring out trash, one has to like make an announcement or warn the beings, otherwise run disrespect of pouring the water on the beings and causing disrespect and causing those beings to be unhappy. Now, some may call that superstition. Again, to the scientific mind, both of those scenarios sound very distantly fetched. However, it's a matter of recognizing that it is addressing something. There is something to be said for that. And with all the amazing things that science does, science also seems to have a very quick tendency of closing a blind eye to things that it doesn't understand, to things that it cannot evidence, and just like putting its head in the sand, ignoring the actuality of those phenomena, or even just the nature of those phenomena, and not even willing to talk about it, because particularly the prospect or the advent of those phenomena is beyond the immediate control of science, and so it's perceived as a threat. So when someone is taken to the psych ward who's perceived as somewhat vulnerable and weak and otherwise, and susceptible to subordination and enslavement, one of the initial questions is, do you see things? Do you hear things? And additionally, because when people are awakening to that experience of the otherworldly, the other realms in this earthly experience, science, at least a number of years ago, seems to perceive that as threat to science, and also the susceptibility to enslavement on the part of the individual. So, anyways, it's an awareness of the multiple realms, and at the risk of sounding whatever for that. And I think that's as much as there is with the notes. So, one of the considerations with that is, to be honest, that there exist phenomena that exist beyond our understanding, beyond our awareness, and in acknowledging that, to be respectful of that, not to be presumptuous, not to be reactionary and hostile to those who communicate that. I mean, we can be mindful if somebody's making claims and then trying to subjugate others or to try to like sell things to others, yeah, we can call that out. But at the same time, be honest. Like, okay, yeah, I don't know too much about this. Maybe it's worth looking into. I'm willing to listen to something. You seem like you have some knowledge, some kind of like sense about things. So we can talk about this and reason about it, but it's just a matter of being honest. And like I said, science at this moment is the new Christianity. By that I mean it's like the new front runner, and people are jumping on the bandwagon. There are the priests. It's difficult to discern who the leadership is, what the authority is, what the standards are, what the ethics. But it's just this hierarchy and the sheep mentality that is kind of transferring from like a secular Christianity towards a secular scientism. So and then again, even the sheep judging other sheep and trying to enslave other sheep or subordinate other sheep, and additionally, it's what we observe within Christianity for a number of thousands of years. We are observing in science just within the past 200 years, and particularly past recent generation and further. So similar kind of tropes of condemnation, and instead of saying original sin, it's a matter of just like it's a matter of unfortunateness of the individual, a dysfunctionality, or otherwise. It's not that person's fault, so it's not a judgmental thing per se, but there's still just the similar kind of not admonishment, but designation and separation and subordination that exists within original sin. Because instead of just proclaiming Jesus as Savior and then abiding by providing tithes and then abiding by the instructions and the guidance of the priests, and additionally in the science respect, it's a matter of acknowledging the prowess, the prominence of science, the necessity or the perceived necessity of technology and those who have a knowledge about that, providing payments for access to the technology and medical benefits and all them things, communicating the science trope about the weather, the meteorologist reports, the doctor's concerns and public announcements, public health announcements. I mean, all the different tropes that are done by the different lineages of science, similar to the Christian proclamations. And there is similar allegiance and getting on board type of things. Again, I said already, the payment, and then abiding by the will. So abiding by the guidance science, buying the newest joint, staying up and being on top of the game in terms of the tech game and everything else like that for those who value that experience. So anyways, it's just we recognize that, and it's a behavioral, it's a collective behavioral experience that can be attributed simply to the world's needs as the world becomes increasingly closer to each other. Historically, I mean, Islam is significant within it, but then particularly in the West, Christianity takes that kind of role in terms of bridging across tribal distinctions and linguistic distinctions. And now it seems as though science is taking over the realms in the West in the past generation. Don't know how long it's going to last, though. Depends on what science can do in terms of flexibility and adjusting and evolving with the conditions, because traditional family is still prevalent, still necessary on Earth, and science is positioned in a very precarious position regarding that, and still has yet to figure out like genuine pluralism, still relying upon the colorist type of apartheid methodologies of civilization. So still some development of that. Also, how it develops in the Eastern civilization, China, Japan, India, and additionally different in the Middle East as well. Africa is a huge thing in that equation as well. People are getting increasingly hostile right here in this intersection. Traffic is blocking intersections, and people are getting frustrated and running up on each other at this very moment. So, anyways, and then their children are waiting to cross the street. So, these are the conditions we're dealing with. So anyways, that's the side note. Now going back to here's the wrap up, the guidance. Kinfolk asked me in recent days about how to do this, how to do that, and to be honest, again, all we can do from this point is teach people how to be mixed heritage Rastafari. For a long time, I endeavored to be everything for everyone, to know things about other people's heritage, and to invite people to go further into their heritage and give as much of as a jump start or a push ahead for people in that direction. And I continue to do that. But when people ask me specific advice, when youth ask me specific advice about relationship behavior, and first of all, like I can only speak from experience. Most credibly, I can speak from what I study when I don't have that experience. But even then, like in the past, I tried to like find out what a person's heritage is, and then give them teachings from that particular heritage. At this point, even then, even now at this point, it's a matter of like I can only talk from the experience of being a mixed heritage Rastafari, and so people can take it for what it's worth. But that's the advice I can provide, and that gives me a further green light to be that, and not have to worry about being diplomatic and otherwise, so that the stories that I tell are coming from that world experience of mixed heritage Rastafari, even when reasoning with Rastafari brethren and sisters. So anyways, that's just the thing. So in that note, particularly from recent conversation, beautiful conversation, all the conversations that I referenced today are beautiful, holy kinfolk within those conversations too. So blessed love and peace to all the kinfolk that I reference, amidst whatever hostilities and anything else that exists. Is love and peace thoroughly for all beings, and so that's 24/7. So and beyond. Now that being said, we're going to go into the guidance. So when people ask me about guidance, about life, about what to do and everything else like that, here's what I'm sharing, and I'm going from notes because you got a green light. This is what I share in terms of practical guidance, because I can share stories here, I can share spot answers about nuggets of wisdom and additionally, but here's like a systemic way of like how to progress on your path, coming from an experience and coming from the guidance of mixed heritage Rastafari. So here's what I share as recommendation. I go back to what I share all the time, which is song, stories, rituals, and ethics. However, I'm going to give it in the reverse order: ethics, rituals, stories, and songs. So, and there are 3 waves for those who have that inclination. So the first wave is further accessible, it's further basic. So the first wave of those 4, ethics, rituals, songs, and stories and songs, is this. For the ethics, Panchasilas, plain and simple, basic foundation. The Buddha teaches us right deeds lead to calm, calm leads to wisdom. Well, actually, calm leads to concentration. Concentration leads to wisdom. Kind of like soda. I got to review that. How about that? But the point is this, particularly for kinfolk, are at the very beginning steps. To do righteousness, to be righteous, to do kind acts, to be righteous in this realm as much as possible. When we do that, that calms our mind. We're at further peace with ourselves. When we have a calmer mind, we can sit and meditate. We can sit and meditate. And when we sit and meditate, then we get insight, we get wisdom, we get solutions to the things that are confounding us. So that's the basic formula. Benevolent deeds, right deeds lead to calm. Calm leads to concentration. Concentration leads to insight, wisdom, understanding, overstanding. So that being the pretext or the framework for looking at this guidance. In wave one, it's the ethics. It's practicing those ethics of the Buddha: peace, sharing, chastity, honesty, sobriety. Each one of those, there's like lower levels. I don't want to say lower, higher, but there is an element of that. There's less, I'll say less strict and further strict versions of each of those ethics. So whatever one finds one's like homeostasis, wherever one finds one's home base at this moment, be mindful of that and do that. Peace, sharing, chastity, honesty, and sobriety. Those 5 ethics. That's what I recommend. That's what I recommend from our experience of Sangha Yosef Asona Ashram within the fold of Rastafari. Now, just as a disclaimer, different Rastafari have different recommendations, so that's part of the nature of Rastafari. So I'm not saying this is the formula for all Rastafari that comes from all Rastafari, but it's from our experience of Rastafari. So there's that. Ethics, Panchasilas, peace, sharing, chastity, honesty, sobriety. Now, in terms of rituals, you got to do something on a regular basis to keep it going, to keep the momentum. So what we recommend is weekly and monthly rituals to get attuned with that. Now, the rituals that we come from are Juma, which is where we are at this moment, Shabbat, and Domingo, Sunday service. In actuality, we frame it in terms of the sequence of Shabbat, Domingo, and Juma. So that's the weekly rituals of our heritage, our tradition. It's also the weekly rituals of the earth and billions of people on this earth. Again, that's part of the strength, that's part of the attunement, that's part of the cipher, that's part of the support. So that's what we recommend. However people find accessibility for that, whether it's going at home initially or whatever people are comfortable, doing it regularly, that weekly thing. Shabbat is a day of rest, getting away from the civilization, quote unquote, and returning to creation in the garden, and just experiencing that for an entire day, Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. Then on Domingo, it's a day of worship, of gathering, fellowship, study, song, and further breaking bread. Some kinfolk do communion. We don't do communion per se specifically, but anyways, that's Sunday. And then Juma is a day of congregational prayer, salat during the midday, sharing some guidance, sharing some wise words and encouraging words, and peaceful words, and beginning that sequence Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in a mindful way, which is where we are at this moment. So that's the rituals. Oh, also, in addition to the weekly rituals, also being further mindful of the monthly rituals. That includes the new moon, it includes the full moon, and it includes the Uposatha days, which occur on the new moon and the full moon. So getting attuned with the weekly cycles and that rhythm, and then also getting attuned with the monthly cycles that are the moon, because that's something that the entire earth experiences. And so again, we're connecting with that cipher and that support. So that's the rituals. Now, when it comes to stories, I'm just going to go initially to Badi Gokada, as I mentioned before. Torah, Bhagavad Gita, Digha Nikaya, Dhammapada, Gospels, Quran, and Tao Te Ching. That's a lot. It's the world. And again, it's a matter of what is accessible to a person, but that's our foundation. The stories that we build from it additionally. Many of the stories of our ancestors are outside of those specific holy scriptures, so we're recognizing that. But in terms of having a functionality with conventional society and world civilization at this moment, it's very, and just being literate about the way the world is, those stories are essential. So that's what we recommend in terms of the wave one. And then the songs, it's a matter of learning just simply the terms peace and love within one's own ancestral languages. So whatever your ancestral languages are, whatever you think your ancestral languages might be, or whatever your ancestral languages are, learn just the basic words of peace and love in your ancestral languages, and start to feel the vibration of your ancestral languages and be able to speak that from your heart. Learn it by heart, and feel that connection, because in that connection, nice catch. In that connection, there's a relationship. Your ancestors are speaking with you, and your ancestors are sharing even further with you, further words, further encouragement, further support. So that's the beginning stage. So that's wave one. Now, for those that are inclined, wave two, wave numero dos. Again, ethics, rituals, stories, and songs. So with the ethics, we go from just the basic foundation of Panchasilas to the further rubric of wealth ethos, soul I dare to be. There are 16 principles with this. Ahimsa Ubuntu Veritas Haya Shuma Kahugia Samadhi Shema Shaboda Narab Nisman for Academia Sadaju Gambala Forgiveness. So it's a matter of like, yo, what are those principles? What are those languages? What are those peoples? What are those traditions? What are those lands? Learning that, and absorbing that. It's mantras now, and it's learning mantras to help the mind concentrate amidst adverse conditions. And additionally, it's one of the mantras I recite on a regular basis. So, and it's not just a mantra. It's again, it's principles. It's a way of life, and it's universal within all the different traditions of the world, one way or another. It's basic principles, even though it's expressed by different traditions and languages. We done got over an hour on this joint. That's okay though. So that's ethics, rituals. So in the first wave, we do the weekly and we do the monthly. Now in the second wave, we're doing the daily. So with the daily, we're talking about salah. We're talking about davening. We're talking about doing yoga. We're talking about samadhi. We're talking about nutrition and exercise. So those things that are done on a daily basis doesn't mean it have to be done every day from the beginning off rip, but just being mindful, like that's part of the daily routine to keep one healthy and strong. Even this week, for this year, it's been a while since I've done every weekly or daily element of discipline and routine, even for a full week. So again, you're your own judge in this earthly realm in that respect. And just be honest about that, and don't expect things outside of that. That's how I phrase this better. Just recognize that whatever you put in, that's what you reap from it as well. So that's it. That's the rituals. Now stories. It's a matter of learning the world culture, stories of the world's cultures. So basic children's stories, traditional stories from around the world. So the foundation I described before in wave one is Tabari Gokadao, the scriptural stories and teachings. This one is the comparatively, I won't say casual, but the traditional children's stories, the further accessible stories, and additionally, but learning some of those stories from different cultures and being able to share that with other people, even from within those cultures. And then for the songs, it's a matter of learning the traditional children's songs, from one's own ancestral language. So learn a song, going from just the couple of words to learning a song. What I missed on the first wave with songs is peace, love in one's ancestral languages, but also in other languages of the world as well, for diplomacy and compatibility. So there's that. So wrapping this up, wave three, for those who want to take it to that level, to this level. Ethics involve the gamut. So once one gets familiar with the Holy Scriptures that I mentioned, Tobari Gokadao, one becomes further knowledgeable about the specific ethics and ethical discipline within the different traditions. And so when we get to this third wave, that's what's involved. We're talking about Panchasilas, what ethos, as I've already described. We're talking about the 613 mitzvot. We're talking about the 5 pillars of Islam and the further deen that the Quran prescribes for the practitioners of Islam. We're talking about the Anarvat from Jain tradition. We're talking about the Gaya Nagoshawa from Haudenosaunee. We're talking about Wu Lun and the principles of filial piety and the experience of filial piety and the duties and ethics of what's translated as the gentleman, and additionally, so there's the element we're talking about, the principles of Kwanzaa, Rastafari liberty. We're talking about the golden rule, and we're talking about patience. So those ethics, that's like high, next level, strict ethical discipline. But in that strict ethical discipline, there's also intrinsic authority and compatibility with other leaders, other civilizations, other societies and cultures, and additionally. So it's a very strong joint. So that's the ethics. When it comes to rituals, now we're talking about the yearly rituals of the world. So we've already addressed the weekly, we've addressed the monthly, we've addressed the daily, and now we're talking about the yearly. So in this third wave, becoming familiar with the yearly rituals of the world, what those are. Many of those stories that we learned in terms of wave 2 of the cultural stories of the world, now it's a matter of sharing these at those rituals of the world. And so that's when we get to the stories, we're sharing those stories of the yearly rituals, and when we get to the songs, we're sharing the songs of the yearly rituals. And so that's what we share at this moment in terms of recommendation for people. Now obviously that's a lot. It's much further than what kinfolk are ready for at this moment, but we are each at a different stage, and it's not higher or lower. With each stage, there are higher expectations, higher susceptibilities of falling off, higher susceptibilities and higher responsibilities for not falling off. So ain't no one greater than another, but those are just the 3 waves, and as a framework, we continue to go with the finding I and I on Mondays, 9 to 12. And we continue to trod. So, trying to think what else. I'm presuming the audio picks up on all this. When I talk about maintaining peace with perceived rivals, I mean, and specifically when I talk about the circumstances with the kinfolk at Little Italy, I'm exactly reminded and guided by the example in the message and the teachings of His Majesty Haile Selassie I, in dealing with the Italian aggressions and invasions and hostilities and atrocities. So we're talking about historic confrontation with Italy, between Italy and Ethiopia. All of Europe infringing on Ethiopia in terms of colonialism and invasion, and additionally, so England is not innocent, France is not innocent, Deutschland is not innocent. It just happens to be that Italia is the one who actually does the invasion of Ethiopia nearly 100 years ago. Now, in that lead up, before that time, His Majesty Haile Selassie I has strong diplomacy with Italia. There's visitation, there's interaction between the emissaries, there's actually economic plans of development. His Majesty Haile Selassie I endeavors to establish a transportation infrastructure for Ethiopia to have access to the water, to do trade. And so it was negotiating with France as well as with Italia for many years before World War II, before the invasion, and additionally, and makes some progression, particularly when he visits the different monarchies of Europe. And I recall he also specifically goes to Italia as well. So he has diplomatic relations with Italia, strong agreements drafted with Mussolini, established. There's actually a treaty between Italia and Ethiopia, specifically promising not to cause aggressions towards each other. So that's part of the backdrop and the pretext before Italy invades formally and woefully and illegally invades Ethiopia. And in that process, when Italy does that, how you doing, bro? When Italy does that, Then Italy starts to do some like some shady stuff of like spreading rumors and telling lies and doing all that kind of duplicitous stuff. And so um, that's that. I mean, and Italy is not alone or exclusive in that practice, but that's just the history. Now, in actuality, when you look at the game, His Majesty Haile Selassie doesn't say this in the autobiography, at least. But to be honest, when we just know how the game is, again, there is rivalry between France and Italy and England about Africa, about just control of Europe and the world, particularly amidst the colonialism. Italy was a little bit on the lower front in terms of the colonial prospects, but there's strong rivalry, particularly in Eastern Africa around Ethiopia. And so there's rivalry between the European factions about who Ethiopia would do a deal with. Because if Ethiopia does a deal with one, that means the other's position in the region is significantly compromised, is increasingly vulnerable. So even though Ethiopia is perceived by the different entities of Europe as being less than, it still has an influence in brokering leverage amongst the rivalry between the European sovereignties. And so that's part of the resentment and frustrations of Europe towards Ethiopia at that moment, particularly Italy. Now, as things were getting ready to get, and there are all different types of duplicity and like people pretending to be agreeable, and in the meanwhile like setting warfare up and just like pretending to have a false front, and just get ready to like make an attack. So it's all different types of things, and we could talk about it being in a gangster thing, but governments are just gangsters who've learned how to take prisoners. So it's the same mentality, it's the same methodologies of lies and small-mindedness, and additionally. So that's what His Majesty is dealing with at that moment, brokering these negotiations. He joined he guides Ethiopia to join the League of Nations, particularly to protect against that type of aggression. And the League of Nations fails, not just fails, but betrays and breaks itself because it doesn't hold up to the agreement to protect Ethiopia. And you can see by what happens after Italy invades Ethiopia 100 years ago, thereabouts, how the other European entities, one, are fearful of Italy because by that point Italy was lined up with Deutschland, of Germany and Hitler. So they wanted to avoid a direct confrontation, and by backing Ethiopia as it was supposed to do, even as through the guise of the League of Nations, it could be perceived as direct aggression against Italy and Deutschland, and they weren't ready to have that type of fight. They weren't ready for them hands. So they just pretended and ignored. Now, at the same time, there's also recognized collusion, meaning that there was the intention of somebody invading Ethiopia. If it wasn't Italy, then there was the propensity of it being England or France. And so there's the consideration, again, this isn't, His Majesty doesn't say this explicitly, and this isn't necessarily explicitly stated. Actually, it's intrinsically stated if you read between the lines. But this is basically a paraphrasing of what is read between the lines. England looks at its diplomatic relationship with Ethiopia. France looks at its diplomatic relationship with Ethiopia. Italy looks at its diplomatic relationship with Ethiopia. And so England, France, and Italy also talk with each other and be like, you know what? We want this Ethiopian thing to be like that's the one like black mark on our colonial map. And so we want one of us to like get that. So who do you think it should be? Well, you know what? Italy looks like the bad guy already. It's had this history with Ethiopia already. England looks like the nice guy. How about we do that bad cop, nice cop kind of thing, so that Italy does the bad invasion type stuff, and then England and or France comes in as the heroes at some point. Meanwhile, like we just set up the pillaging the natural resources and additionally in that process. So, you know, we'll divide it up as we deem fit quietly amongst ourselves at some other point. But how about that scenario? So again, that's not what's explicitly written, but it actually lightweight is because, and His Majesty knows this because Italy and England established an effective contract with each other to divide the land of Ethiopia and then provide Ethiopia with that memo after they had already made that decision. And so His Majesty takes issue with that. Wait, you hold up, what? You talking about what? Dividing what? Our homeland? No. So he takes that to the League of Nations. And then Italy responds by saying, well, it's unfortunate that the leadership of Ethiopia doesn't understand the text of our agreement, and in no way did we abrogate what is written in the Constitution, so to speak, of the League of Nations or otherwise. And I'm sure that will be clear through our explanation of the hearing, and we'll see how unfounded the concerns of the Ethiopian leadership actually is. So it's that condescending. Oh, the black people don't understand what they're doing, and so they're trying to like get beyond their lane about understanding world affairs, and additionally, and it's condescending because it's exactly what it was. It's like, yo, we're about to come through and take this joint. But anyways, all that being said, the point here is like just recognizing the duplicity, and so in experiencing at this moment with what the circumstances are, not just with Little Italy, but just all around the board with the status quo, with the streets, with LGBTQ, and further with Israeli-Palestine. I mean, it's an old story, and it just goes through iterations of new names and somewhat new faces. So, anyways, that's the consideration, and that's the guidance as well. Because again, the grace of His Majesty Haile Selassie is so encouraging and inspirational. Because even after his people are killed and murdered by the Italian military and peoples, after poison gas is continually dropped on civilians, women and children, killing women and children, beyond just like the actual like army things of rape and pillaging and everything else like that, when those atrocities are committed against the people of Ethiopia, the subjects of His Majesty Haile Selassie, and he has to leave and live in England in exile in order to organize the support to return to Ethiopia and remove the Italian invaders. After all that goes down, after the League of Nations betrays His Majesty Haile Selassie, after he leaves his country and pleads for the well-being of his peoples, and still the League of Nations doesn't do anything. Even after all of that, His Majesty doesn't go around after all the other nations of Europe are done, are ashes, are crumbled rocks and stones, after incessant bombing and additionally, and experience their own atrocities. His Majesty Haile Selassie doesn't say, "I told you so," or otherwise. He's like, "Oh, yo, we got building to do. Come on, let's get to it. United Nations, okay, let's roll. Okay, yeah, we're gonna have to decolonize Africa. You know that, yeah? Okay, Organization of African Unity, and further." So it's like, yo, there's too much work to do to get caught up in the ego, to get caught up in the little provocations. A true king, a true righteous king, a true righteous queen knows about the provocations of head knockers and the provocations of divide and conquer and distraction. So I've just spent an hour and a half responding to that, or somewhat. I mean, some of what I share is beyond that as well, about additional things. But anyways, that's this joint. We're still deliberating about the jaywalking life. That's facts, because what I describe in terms of the pedestrian life applies to economics and politics globally. So that's the implications. And when one knows the intrinsic nature of one's being, one sees what I'm saying. So when I talk about the jaywalking life, it's serious implications, and it's not something to be endeavored lightly, because it also takes some familiarity. We done lived the jaywalking life before, years ago. We know what that is. It's no given, it's no guarantees, it's no invincibility. It does require like being further on the P's and Q's, and looking out, and additionally, but at this point, there's a consideration of it being actually safer and further honest, and even further systemic than the actual conventional laws. So that's what we're dealing with at this moment. And we study, we pray, we do our routines. We heed the guidance of His Majesty Haile Selassie, our ancestors, prophets, and sages who go before us and who teach us perseverance, humbleness, daily work, humble work, honest work, collective work, altruistic work, service, seva. So with that, all thanks and praise to the Most High, Elohim, blessed love and peace, and Rastafari.